Welcome into 19 on the Clock. We are your Tri-State high school and college sports podcast right here in the Cincinnati area. I am Brad Pushkar. Joining me is my co-host, Jackson McCarty. And Jackson, second episode.
Yep.
We're finally getting out there.
We're back.
And we're glad to be back.
Of course.
But the best part about this week is that we're getting into basically every team in high schools going to the playoffs for high school football.
Kentucky has finally joined us. Indiana's 2 or 3 weeks ahead of us now, but like you said,
plenty of time to catch up.
100%. And across the board, every game can be any team's last now. So the stakes are all the way up. The importance level is all the way there. And matter of fact, we've got a couple of them out in Indiana that's where I'm headed to this weekend, and that are really exciting me.
And these are going to be sectional championships.
Yes.
We're looking at Lawrenceburg and Batesville playing.
Yes.
And then East Central playing Franklin Community.
Mm-hmm.
As you head into these games, how do these teams look as we're heading towards an eventual state title?
So Lawrenceburg, we'll start with them,
Sure.
3A, and kind of work our way up to 5. But they have looked really, really good to this point. We haven't been able to just get a ton of games out there. Indiana's a bit harder to access from the station than some of these closer teams. That said, what I have seen from Lawrenceburg been super impressive. Right now they're 10-1 on the season. Their only loss, East Central. The other team from Indiana in our viewing area that's still hanging around. So you take that with pride. You look at their scores that they've had so far. Last week, 59-6 against Greensburg, and then 2 weeks ago when the playoffs started, 34-8 against South Dearborn. They played the South Dearborn back-to-back. It was close that first time, but now that the playoff lights are on, kind of ran up that score a little bit more.
And that's what you want to see is your team turning out, especially when you get into the playoffs. How does East Central look as they head up against Franklin Community? East
Central's been pretty promising as well. Getting that win over Lawrenceburg has absolutely been a crucial part for them. They're 7-3. Last week they beat Seymour 35-0. So can't ask for a better start than that to your playoff run. Overall, they've got a 336 to 129 point differential, which when you get into the high school level, these differentials sound very funny, and we've got quite a few of them, but outscoring almost 3 times your opponent should do the trick. And a big part of that is the running back. I'm not 100% sure if I'm saying your last name right, but Ryan Mings. He's, let's see here, 12 carries, 225 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns just last week. Yeah.
Good showing.
Yeah, that'll do it, won't it? So he was an absolute beast in that opener. Nyden Houston, we talked about him last week.
Yes.
Credited with a sack, 2 tackles in that game. Got in there, wasn't necessarily making some of those ball hawk impact plays that we thought he would, but getting into that backfield, you take it either way.
Absolutely. Do you want to see a little bit more from him this week?
Yeah. I want to see that defense kind of come alive. Maybe cause a bit more havoc in terms of turnovers and making that other offense sweat a little bit more. But their offense in and of itself, I'm not really worried about. If you can turn out 250 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, you've hit your bar. You know what I mean? If you can get that every week, you walk away happy and smiling. It's that defense that I hope can kind of show some of that as well.
And moving back to Lawrenceburg, are there some players that are standing out to you from that?
Yeah. Matter of fact, there are. Crew Gilmore, their quarterback, we talked about him as well.
Okay.
Dual threat. He's got about 1,100 pass yards, a little over 700 rushing yards in 10 games. I'm not entirely sure, trying to find those stats. I believe that just accounts for the regular season, so add on top of whatever he's got in the playoffs as well. Over 20 touchdowns this year, had 11 just on the ground through the regular season, so that's massive. And he's just a sophomore. That part really impresses me. You look across the tri-state at the high school level, and you see a lot of guys that are unfinished products when they're younger, maybe splitting time. You don't really see a whole lot of freshman or sophomore starting quarterbacks. For Lawrenceburg, who has been such just a really good program, at least in the time that I've been here, and I know predating me, to have a guy that is as young as Crew is, being like, you're our quarterback, we trust you, getting to 10-1 on the year, doing what he does, offering, from the ground in the air, really impressive. And then on the defensive side of stuff, Noah Kay, Coach's son, he's been lighting it up. His career through high school is one that I will probably never forget. Over 300 tackles, over 65 tackles for loss, over 20 sacks.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, that's a trifecta of a headache to deal with. So he's always an impact guy. You always have to worry about him when you're playing him. So that status quo just kind of continues here.
Well, you talked about Lawrenceburg and like the history with that program. Mm-hmm. It's been about a decade since I was in high school, but I lived up in Northeast Indiana.
Right.
But we still heard Lawrenceburg get talked about because
Yep.
it was just such a strong football team.
Well, and even as recently as last year with Josh Ringer winning,
Yes.
the player of the player of the year for Indiana. They churn out so much talent. They get so much in terms of results, and this year's just been another example of that.
Absolutely. So you talked about a lot of great run stats. Mm-hmm. Moving over to Ohio now, we got another team that has a very strong run game.
Yes.
But this could be a defense that's able to match them.
So Joe Daneman and I, you guys might have heard of him, we were talking after final quarter last week.
Yes.
And this was one of the games that they highlighted on the show, being like, you have to make sure to watch or keep up with this or find some way to know how this one ended, because it is going to be so vital to the remainder of the playoffs, not just while we're still here in Cincy, but way till the very end. St. X, Winton Woods, you've heard plenty about, even though this podcast has not been on air but for 2 weeks now, I can imagine that it is at every Kroger or gas station or grocery store anywhere near Winton Woods, all they talk about is that defense.
Yes.
It is top-notch, unbelievable, continuously so. I mean, year after year they turn in great results. On the other side of that, St. X, a very prestigious, long-running, very notable program within Cincinnati. Their defense has really looked good over the past couple weeks, and then you pair it with their offense, Chase Herbstreit and some of their running backs, they're going to gash you for about 200, almost guaranteed every game just on the ground.
And that's just really a testament to how much those players are putting out on the field each week.
Absolutely. Well, when you have a quarterback like Herbstreit that just straight up does not care to put it all out there on the line. Yes. Every play that he has, it is absolutely a chance that it is about to go for 60, 70, 80 yards, just because through the air he can get it done, on the ground he can get it done. I mean, almost 1,300 passing, almost 500 rushing, a little over 20 all told, touchdowns, and has been doing pretty good with his turnovers as well. 4 picks, 1 interception across 11 games now.
Hey.
Yeah, I mean,
take that.
Yeah, that's less than a half of a turnover a game.
Yes.
So, if your quarterback's managing like that, you should be on easy street. But no, I did mention that their defense has been really good over these past couple weeks. I want to tell you about what that means. 57 total yards allowed versus Milford. 50
Okay.
in a full game, not a half, not a quarter. 57 total yards, and then they were also credited with 42 total yards allowed versus Life Christian Academy.
That's 10 to 15 yards a game for both those.
Yeah, I mean that
or 10 to 15 a quarter.
Yes,
per game.
And that's, I mean, is that unsustainable? Yeah,
absolutely.
But
respectfully,
right. But to even string it together for 2 games should be unsustainable, and they have. And with Winton, like I said, you talk a lot about that defense. You don't necessarily talk about the offense near as much. Okay. So there is some point, to hope. But when you have Isaiah Garrett running against you, that can form some problems as well. He's got almost 900 rushing yards, little over 1,000 all-purpose on the year, 9 rushing touchdowns, 2 fumbles, 100 yards in each of his last 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: is this going to be a battle of for both offenses and both defenses, a little bit of a unstoppable forces meet immovable objects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's absolutely going to be one of those things that I'm not even. So I believe last week I talked a lot about, I don't remember which game it was specific, but who can win and set that tone in the first quarter.
Yes.
That doesn't really apply for me here. Okay. I want to see who comes out of half with that energy, because the way these defenses play, you're going to get beat up.
Yes.
You're going to have some bruises. You're probably going to have an ice pack on going into the half. But it's who can rally from that and say, you know what, we know we're playing some tough dudes on the other side of this line, but this game is not over. And I want to see who runs out of that tunnel quicker and a little bit angrier.
So it's much more of a who has the longevity, who has the endurance. Really.
Absolutely.
This is a cross country run. This isn't a track sprint.
Yeah. This is the tortoise and the hare. And you have to be able to withstand for all 4 quarters, no matter which team you're cheering for, no matter who you're on here. I think that third matters so much more than the first, in this game specifically.
Okay, that sounds like this sounds like a fun game to go and watch. A good challenge,
yes,
for fans to.
If you miss football from the 1980s. This is this was made for you. Not to say that neither one of these teams can pass or anything like that, but it's going to be 3 yards and a cloud of dirt. Or dust, rather, sorry.
Yeah.
And
it's like turf now.
Right. It's all the same. These schools have enough funding that, yeah, you're right, it is turf.
Yeah.
This one speaks to my heart a little bit because it reminds me of old school SEC football.
There you go.
Yeah.
You want to see the grass stains on these teams.
100%. I want to think both teams' jersey colors are green, and they've done me a giant disservice because I can't tell who's different. That's what I want by the end of this game.
Well, it does have the green and blue already.
Yeah,
so
bit.
now
we're
next
halfway.
is just match.
Yeah, we're halfway.
Adding green.
We're halfway. Yeah, they both got that blue.
So moving from
Yes.
a defensive battle to an offensive one,
Yes.
we've seen Lakota East and Moeller both show some strong offenses so far this year, and now they get to match up and see who has the better one.
Yeah, so obviously Matt Ponatoski for Moeller, just an incredible year. JT Kitna on the other side, John Kitna's son. John Kitna, obviously the coach out at East. They've been doing some great work themselves. I've been to, I believe, one Lakota East game this year. Liked what I saw, was pretty impressed. But when you're going up against an offense like Moeller, I've been pretty vocal about saying that I think Moeller's probably the best team in the state. I think you would be hard pressed to find 15 football teams across the United States that are better than Moeller. And when you get into the Texases and the Floridas and the Californias, to say that they're in that top 15 range across the board should tell you what kind of talent we're talking about here.
Yes, I was talking because we've talked a lot about Moeller through the season, whether just because you've been going to those games or things like that. Talk to me a little bit about Lakota East, because I don't think I've heard as much from you about them.
Yeah.
Where do their strengths lie? Who's going to be kind of the key for them this game?
So right now, just to preface it, 8-3, coming off of 42-28 win against West Claremont, 375-244 differential. So almost at that 400 mark, but your defense is letting up a little bit more there.
Yes.
I mentioned JT Kitna, so I'll quickly run through his numbers. About 2,400 passing yards, another 200 on the ground, nearly 30 touchdowns. This is where we start to get a bit problematic. 4 picks, not crazy, 5 fumbles.
That's tough.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get a little bit of pressure. You I don't want to call it hero ball, but you try to rectify a play that you should probably just be tossing it out. Fumbles come loose. It happens. You can't afford those against Moeller.
It's either you need to toss it out or you tuck it, hold it, and take it.
Either absorb that sack or get it out. There's no middle ground here, because if you hang around that pocket for too long, Moeller has those guys that will come in and add a couple more fumbles to that total.
Yes.
But on defense, the defense has some impact players. I'd like to see a little bit more unity and uniformity. I think that they slip a little bit at times. But I do want to point out Cohen Ripe, who has over 130 tackles on the year, 3 forced fumbles. So going that other way, I know JT Kitna is probably pumped that he doesn't have to deal with Cohen in this game.
Right.
He's got an interception as well. And then in the secondary, you've got Connor Cruz, almost 100 tackles. He's at 98, 4 interceptions, 1 pick six. So he can get to the ball. He can get dynamic with it, extend that, add some points. He is the guy, in my opinion. If you're picking any player on either team, Connor Cruz, if he shows up in this game, or if he can get to the ball, or if Ponatoski doesn't quite put the right spin on it or doesn't quite put it in the right window, that is the guy who can change the momentum, change the pace, change the script of this game entirely.
Now, just so I'm clear, You said 98 sacks. That's this year?
98 tackles.
98 tackles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, Freudian slip there.
All good. I was like,
What would
why
that
isn't
be?
he like?
Yeah,
why aren't we putting him on billboards? That's insane.
10 sacks a game, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's like 9 a game almost. That's,
Trey Hendrickson would be jealous.
I was like, I want to put him in the Bengals right now.
Put him in the Louvre at that point. But on the other side, Moeller, of course, 10-1. Only loss was against Mallard Creek, North Carolina, in overtime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was like week 2 or 3 of the season.
Yes.
So,
very early on.
yeah, it's been a while since they've been in the loss column. 455 to 188 differential.
Ooh,
Yeah.
That's a tough hill to climb.
I mean, what do you do with that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's absurd. To have 450 just in general sounds fake. But to still, for your offense to be scoring enough to have the other team have so many possessions in a game and you still have them under 200, like that.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to wrap my brain around it. We've talked about Ponatoski, 39 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Yeah.
Those are numbers you like as a coach.
Yeah,
That's what you want to see.
He is the king of efficiency in the tri-state.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a more efficient quarterback, doesn't matter where you look, than Matt Ponatoski. So he's been great, 5 games over 300 as well, so it's not like he's sitting back and picking up 180, 190. He's going for it when he needs to. And then on defense, Christian Harris, you can't not talk about him. 6.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. We talked about JT Kitna's fumble issues. Mm-hmm. If some of those are going to get knocked loose, I'd expect Christian Harris to be in or around that play almost every time.
Okay. Being the one that causes the fumble or the one coming to grab it and picking it up?
Causing it, picking it up, causing JT to run the other way into another guy that forces it, whatever it is. If that pocket pressure starts to collapse on him, I think Christian Harris will be essentially the catalyst for that happening.
Okay. Well, hey, again, this is just, I feel like we've gotten to a point where we're getting a lot of good, fun matchups.
Yes.
Even if I think at the end of the day, we don't know what's happening heading into Friday.
No.
And they could come out and it could be just a wash with one team blowing another out.
Of course.
When you are just when you're getting into the stance, you're like, this game's going to be fun.
Yeah, we're officially at the vibes season of football. Like I know like you have your Friday Night Lights atmospheres every week, but this is where like you show up and you're like, oh, this is like 70% of the students are here.
This is a time for a vibe check.
Yeah,
literally. Pass.
It's that one today.
I know, but that's the
okay.
stand.
Okay.
That's the stand.
There you go. Yes, it is vibe check season in football. And all of these games that we're talking about will absolutely pass that. I'm expecting some just incredible atmospheres out there.
Yes, and again, playoff atmosphere. Not just in Indiana, not just in Ohio, it's spreading across to Kentucky now.
Absolutely.
We got South Oldham coming in to play Cooper.
Yeah. So you and I have not gotten to talk about Cam O'Hara very much.
I think one time.
Right. And that is because he is playing so good that it is hard to ever think that a team is going to be that close in comparison to where it's like, oh, this could be a fun game. No.
Okay.
It's just that Cooper is that good. And Cam O'Hara is such a massive part of that. They're 10-0, in case you weren't aware. Cam has almost 3,500 passing yards, or 2,500, sorry. Okay. 34 touchdowns in the air, 4 on the ground, 2 picks. Yeah, I know. If you're going to have a rival for efficiency with Ponatoski, it's going to be Cam O'Hara.
Yeah.
And then he is 3 touchdowns away from 100 in his career. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's about to hit that mark. He is in conversations for the Kentucky Player of the Year.
He's a senior?
Junior, I believe.
Junior.
You might have to fact check me on that, but yeah, he's
right here.
Yes. Yeah,
What
there
is
you
he?
go. But no matter how, if he's 17, 18, he's balling, is what he is.
Yes.
And then on the other side, Austin Alexander, just an absolute freak of nature. Over 35 sacks in his career, over 200 tackles. Also on offense, over 400 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Yeah.
Those are just numbers you can't argue with.
Right. You're going defensive end, tight end. and you're, producing very legitimate numbers both ways, there's nothing more you can do for your team at that point. You know what I mean? You have maxed out your potential just because you've hit that bar. You are setting the standard there. So, of course, they've got South Oldham coming into this game. Let me double check. 7-3 here, about 60 points in favor on the differential. Lost to Anderson 51-6 to open the year, though. So that's, as far as local teams go, Anderson, of course, an incredible football team, but that would be like their lone real comparative one. And then their last game, 42-41 loss to Collins 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so really narrow, and it's hard to know too much about them at this point.
Yeah.
But, just based on what we know about Cooper, anybody walking in there is going to have a tough time.
It feels like it's a very favored game for Cooper.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in most games, if you go through a whole season undefeated, we know that you're pretty good.
And when your quarterback's putting up crazy numbers, you might be good. Who knows?
Of course. Which, speaking of pretty good, actually, speaking of very good, we have a number, I believe 4 or 5, within the viewing area that are going to the Volleyball State Championships this weekend.
Yes, we do. The Ohio High School Volleyball State Championships, which it's technically in the semifinals on Saturday.
And then Sunday is the finals.
Is the actual finals, yes.
Right.
So it's not the championship games, but this is still a major accomplishment for all of these teams.
Championship weekend.
So let's break them down real quick. We'll go from 1A to 5A real quick.
Yeah.
All right, in D1, we have Seton playing Pickerington North. That I know that they played, I believe, Mason earlier in the tournament as well to get to this the semifinals. That's the word I'm looking for. So congratulations to them. In D2, St. Ursula is playing against Wadsworth. And in D3, it is Ursuline Academy playing Bishop Watterson from Columbus.
Yeah, and then up at D4, we've got Roger Bacon. They're taking on Vincent Warren. And then D5, Bishop Watterson kind of in our DMA.
Bishop Fenwick.
Bishop Fenwick.
There you go.
They're up in Middletown. I get a little bit confused as to if they fall into the Dayton area or the Cincinnati area. Either way, we're going to shout them out because they've done an incredible job. And they're playing Ottawa Glandorf in the D5.
So that'll be some more fun games to watch this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what, Jackson? As we speak about Saturday and this weekend, we have more great sports to watch, especially college football.
Yeah, tell me more, Brad.
So let me tell you some things real quick. So
is this a story about heartbreak?
No, this is about love for a team and the unbeatable devotion. So this is our big noon Saturday game right here on Fox 19 now. You can watch it at noon. But let me tell you, 17 wins over AP top 5 teams.
Okay.
How many teams do you think have accomplished that in history? Just in the history of college football.
But what's the time period? 17 wins over top 5 AP teams, just all told.
I think since 1930, something like that. 1940.
I'm gonna, just based on the amount of legacy programs, I'm gonna go with 6.
Okay, so too high. There's only one.
Okay.
Only one team. And that stays the same as you go down for 16 wins, 15 wins, 14 wins, 13, and 12 wins.
So 11 is your next best.
That 11 is the next best over top 5 teams. Now, what team has 17 wins over top 5 AP teams?
Am I allowed to use context clues?
Absolutely, you can.
Ohio State.
Wrong.
Purdue.
It's Purdue. It is the Purdue University Boilermakers, my alma mater, and the team that is playing the number 3 AP poll, number 2 college football playoff ranking, Ohio State. And obviously, moving forward, as the rankings have come out now, we're going to start using those rankings when we refer to them. But still, this could be another historic win for Purdue. And in fact, the last time that they had a historic win over a top 2 AP Ohio State was in 2018, and I was in the stands, so I'm going to play that clip here right now. So that was the last time that Purdue beat Ohio State 6 years ago, and that is not happening again this year.
No. Your 16's cool and all. It's not going to 17. Let me tell you.
17's cool, not going to 18.
There you go.
Yes.
Rather, sorry.
And in fact, it's 9 wins over top 2 teams,
God,
which I was. No, I was not also at. Michigan State dropped when they upset them a couple years ago too. Point being, I like going to games where we upset teams, but I won't be at this game.
I was about to say, so it's a good thing you're still in the Tri-State for most of our listeners.
For most of our Ohio State fans. I'm not going to Columbus. And I don't even think, even if I was there, that this would mean anything. Purdue is not a great team this year.
No.
Love them. There's a lot of bright players that I think can do good things. Hudson Card as the quarterback, who spent some time in Austin before coming up to play for us. He's got 1,005 yards. We also had to have a backup come in for him for a game, and they've been splitting some time, things like that. I do want to give a shout out to Devin Mockabee on Purdue, who is the running back. Okay. About 540 yards so far this year, while they are 1-7 with no wins against Big Ten teams.
Any production whatsoever is a beacon of light.
And he's nicknamed Crazy Legs. It's one of my favorite, Devin Crazy Legs Mockabee. He is a good running back, and I think he has a lot of potential that the offense just can't always figure out how to make work for him. And our player with the highest receiving yards is a tight end as well. Nice. Max Clare. 462 yards. So we can look back at that 2018 game and kind of talk about why that worked for Purdue. One of the big things that Jeff Brom always did with his offense was really designed plays to open up a wide receiver.
Okay.
He did it with Rondale Moore. Mm-hmm. He did it with David Bell. Mm-hmm. He did it with Charlie Jones, who is now a Cincinnati Bengal. Where you just figure out a way to trick the defense into letting a man, to either let them go one-on-one and know they're going to beat that guy, or make the defense think one thing's happening and then let them break out and you go, oh crap, we let that guy go. How'd that happen?
Right.
I don't think Ryan Walters is Ryan Walters is starting to figure that out. Of this is how we can make our wide receivers be open, give more options to our quarterback. But the Ohio State team, I don't think, is going to even give the Purdue offense the time to develop that play.
Right.
You know what I mean?
This is not the open practice option in Madden.
No.
I mean? This is the Super Bowl, and you cannot afford to be figuring things out when you go up against a team. I mean, I presume a lot of you guys watched Ohio State's game last week. Mm-hmm. Now imagine against a worse team. Like, no offense.
No, you're right.
But like it is, the writing is on the wall. It's not. I feel like with upsets, a lot of the time you will get this sense of like, okay, well, the talent level's different, but there's momentum, or one team is better, but there's this chip on this shoulder, whatever. The chip on the shoulder weighs more than the University of Purdue's football program as a whole right now.
Absolutely. And I was just saying, and like, you look at that, you look back at that 2018 game, and you had a senior year David Blau, who was really able to figure things out. You had a freshman year Rondale Moore, who ended up being a great player for Purdue.
We've never talked about this. Rondale Moore is one of my favorite college players of all time.
Hey.
I love Rondale Moore so much.
Let me tell you, he's one of mine too.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
But I mean, honestly, between him and Charlie Jones, getting to watch them play, and David Bell too, I don't want to diminish him. They're like a big three of wide receivers that I've gotten to watch. Unfortunately, not while I was at Purdue, but since then, it's just been fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as the current Purdue goes, they don't have a Rondale, they don't have a Charlie Jones, They don't have a David Bell, and Ohio State has all that and more to defend against anybody that Purdue trots out there.
Purdue's biggest asset is on defense, Dylan Thieneman, who is the brother of another former Purdue player that was there when I was in classes as well. He's got great. I believe he's safety or cornerback. Okay. Plays secondary.
Right.
Is how I should put that. But so much has been put on him this year that you don't get to actually see him really succeed. And I don't think that that's going to change with Ohio State. I don't want to drag on about this too long. I will say one thing for Ohio State is that they do have a 4-star running back recruit attending, Derek Cooper. Okay. He's for the 2026 class. Mm-hmm. If you're going to pick a game to show how good your team can be and how strong your running backs can probably be, it's going to be this one. So that's probably smart by Ohio State.
Do you have numbers on Purdue's running defense so far this year?
Their defensive success rate against the rush is 93rd in the country.
Okay.
It's one of their better defensive stats. I honestly think this would be a game for Will Howard, just kind of let it fly. Mm-hmm.
You could tale of two halves that, you know what I mean? Air the ball out 20 times in the first half, let your running game take over the second.
Absolutely. And Henderson and Judkins are just going to.
Right. Even with some of those inefficiencies they've had this year, it's still Judkins and Henderson.
We talked about last week the offensive line for Ohio State and where there could be some openings with Penn State. And I think that those openings aren't going to show even if you do have more injuries or anything like that.
Well, there's a pretty decent chance that the guys on visits could come down in their hoodies and do okay. But
take a couple snaps, yeah.
Yeah. No, that feels disrespectful to Purdue. But that said, it is just being dramatic to show Ohio State knows that they're multiple levels above. Purdue still trying to figure it out. This could be a really fun one in 2 years' time. This year, not so much.
Yeah, and again, I love Purdue. I love my team. This year's just been a rough year, and it's hard to look for things that are bright. I read one of the fan pages, Hammer and Rails was trying to write something up, and they're like, so here's the one thing that they could do to maybe close the gap a little bit. It's still a gap. It's still a large canyon.
Purdue, if you play perfect, you will only lose by 30 on Saturday.
Well, and that's let's talk about projections and points. The lines opened at 38.5 in favor of Ohio State. 53.5 total. The college football graphs brings together a lot of advanced statistics to project points for teams. Projects Ohio State to be about 39, Purdue to be 7.5.
Yeah, that's fun.
99% win probability for Ohio State, 0.93% for Purdue.
Didn't even get the 1%.
It didn't even get up to the 1%. There's those little decibels that cause problems.
That is heartbreaking.
But again, that'll be your big noon Saturday. Yes. I think it's still worth a watch if you want to just have chill out on your Saturday.
If you want to watch what looks like Madden on rookie mode, then
all right, man.
Yeah, sorry.
Calm down.
Now let's get to one that seems a little bit closer to even here.
Yes. This is again another game that I'm always excited for. I've been loving watching UC this year.
Yeah.
They're going to be hosting West Virginia, also at noon on Saturday. So if you don't want to sit at home and watch the Ohio State game, there's also a game down at Nippert to head to. So UC is 5-3, 3-2 in the Big 12. West Virginia is 4-4, 3-2 in the Big 12. One interesting thing for both these teams, both played Pitt. Obviously, West Virginia has the backyard brawl. Cincinnati had the loss in week 2 of the year this year. Both of them played really tightly to Pitt, and I think just from then, you've seen Cincinnati turn it on a little bit more, and West Virginia have honestly some tougher opponents, just even within the conference, but also just overall that it's been a little bit tougher for them. this is the start to a streak of ranked teams for UC. Or the calm before the storm, I should say.
Right. This is kind of where you start to feel that volume turning up a little bit before you go full blast in the coming weeks.
Yes, because you can get bowl eligibility with this game. I absolutely think that UC can win this game against West Virginia.
Of course.
But after this, they'll play Iowa State, who arguably had been in contention for the Big 12 playoff spot, but they lost last week. Kind of got knocked down, and now BYU's just clearing out for it.
Yeah, well ahead.
Then they are playing Kansas State,
who
was 19th in the rankings, and again, another Big 12 team that could be competing for both a title and be in that conference spot.
A perennial headache as well.
Yes. Kansas State's been very solid for like the last 5, like almost 10 years, I'd say.
I'm kind of shocked Kleiman's still there.
Yeah.
He is one of those guys. Like, I know Leipold got a lot of attention, 2 years ago now, I guess?
Yes.
And I was, that whole time, I'm like, she's probably looking at Manhattan and not Lawrence. Because, Kleiman's going to put really good teams on the field every single year. So that one's going to be, that's one that whenever we started this, I kind of started looking at their schedule and trying to get an idea of this, and I went, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But you go to the Big 12, you got to play Big 12 teams.
Yes, and I was just saying, those are 2 Big 12 teams that West Virginia has already played,
right.
Iowa State and Kansas State. And then Cincinnati will end with TCU on the schedule. Just looking at some stats, I want to shout out Brendan Sorsby. 2,100 yards already this year.
He's so good.
He's so good.
He was one of those guys that is just consistently exceeding expectations.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people on paper probably looked at this UC team, looked at how everything last year went, I'm not going to put too many chips in this, but they've really rallied.
Well, and for him to be a transfer from a team that was struggling.
Yes.
And obviously, IU has a new coach, and everything's different for them now. As they are, I think they reached 10-0 or 9-0 for the first time in a long time. It's really great to see. This is why, like, when people start complaining about the transfer portal, you do need to kind of take a step back and go, no, there's really good things about the transfer portal.
I love the portal. I just don't like how lawless it is.
And that's totally fair.
Right.
I think that's absolutely true. And I also don't think that teams like Florida State or Colorado, who kind of just were like, hey, we're just going to use the transfer portal to make a team this year. It does diminish the importance of recruiting, but you also look at teams, obviously a little different bit of a scenario, like Army, who are doing very well. They don't use the transfer portal because you have to be enlisted.
Right.
So, but still, it was like it's Army, Navy, and Clemson, I think, are the teams that didn't use the transfer portal at all this year.
And Dabo has just been so vocally like, we're not doing that.
And I think in the long term, he will change on that.
He will have to.
Absolutely. But I also don't think he needs to. I think where his mindset is like portal bad.
Right, and you can't do that.
And you can't do that. You got to just go, okay, well, this guy is a good player. We want him to come to Clemson.
Yeah, you don't have to bring in your whole roster.
Yes.
But if you find 1 or 2 impact guys that you say, you know what, maybe you got a bad shake where you're at last, or maybe you've just outperformed your previous setting, we can bring you in here, plug you in. That can be the difference in 7 wins and 9, just because you have an extra receiver that you can trust, or an extra lineman that has looked really good. Yes. But that said, Brendan Sorsby, to circle back to where we're at, a brilliant and shining example of how valuable that portal can be.
Absolutely. And how if a coach can read for this is a player that we need to have on this team who will mesh well and arguably help lead, is a great thing to pick up. On the West Virginia side, you've got Garrett Green, who a little bit of like a dual threat that I think is kind of fun. 1,350 yards passing, 471 rushing yards.
Okay. Yeah.
Their running back, who I want to say his first name is Jaheim White, 471 rushing yards.
Oh. A little bit of symmetry there.
So a little bit of nice matching there.
You like that.
And I haven't watched West Virginia closely, so I do not know if that is just scrambling out of necessity or if they're designing plays to give him more run options, which I like to see that.
And I think to have 471 rushing yards, it can't all be necessity.
No.
Especially because college football counts your sacks.
Yes.
In that negative aspect. So he's probably actually got 500 or more. So yeah, how does UC do against scrambling quarterbacks?
I don't think we've really seen that this year.
Yeah.
Because Shadur's mobile.
Right, but he's not a...
He's not a Lamar.
I wouldn't call him a dual threat. He is.
Yes.
But that's not his style.
He's a threat because he can do it, but he's not going to often.
Would you say he's a dual threat, not a dual promise?
Yes. He's a threat, not a promise.
Sorry, that was bad.
No, that was actually one of your better ones. But going back, I think that Colorado game showed some weaknesses for the defense, but you also, when you have a receiver like Travis Hunter that you have to cover, you're going to have a weakness.
Right.
So I do think that'll be interesting with West Virginia moving into this weekend. I definitely think it's also this one's a little more interesting because we always talk about the lines opened at 3.5 points in favor of UC.
Okay.
I haven't checked to see if it's moved much. I think it's more interesting to look at where they open.
As opposed to where they close. Yeah,
exactly.
Because once you get past open, it's all market movement.
Exactly.
It's not really projection.
Or maybe an injury, something like that.
Right.
But it's mostly market movement. So open 3.5, 57.5 total.
Okay.
Projections put UC at about 32, West Virginia at 24.
Okay.
So about a touchdown difference.
Yeah.
And gives UC about 73% win chance versus West Virginia at 27%.
So yeah, pretty promising. It doesn't look like it's going to be a runaway, but
no, I think you could. I think this will be one where we want to see what happens in the first half. I think UC could run away with it in the first half. I also think it could be very close, but then it's about that second half where UC keeping that momentum going, which I think they've shown this year in games like Tech, in games even like Pitt, where the offense kept cooking.
Yeah,
it's going to be on that defense to keep it up and prevent West Virginia from trying to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. So what time's kickoff for this one?
Noon.
Okay.
Noon and Nippert.
Perfect.
So, and again, Miami played on Tuesday, on Election Day.
Okay.
That was a fun one where I quad boxed. I quad
we got an action back.
That, Bowling Green, and our coverage of the election. I was like, this is neat.
It's like, yeah, we'll take that.
But they did win over Ball State. I want to say 27-21. It might have been 28-21. But a good win for them. MAC still kind of up in the air. Bowling Green State's going to be their last game of the year. Bowling Green State's kind of looking like they could be a MAC title contender.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. UK, Louisville, and those are the other two teams that I would have mentioned are both off this weekend. So I know the week after there's going to be a lot of games, and they're going to be pretty fun, especially as we get into the heart of kind of finalizing these conferences and seeing where everybody ends up.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And then obviously whenever these games wrap up, when you're looking for your next high school games, college games, come back right here. We'll break it all down, build it back up for you.
Yes, and of course watch Final Quarter on Friday nights. We have sports wraps on Saturday and Sunday nights and Saturday and Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
So another great week down, another great week of sports in the tri-state, Jackson. I'm looking forward to it, and I look forward to all the playoff coverage from you guys moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time.
All right, so we will see you guys again next week. Be sure to tune in and be sure to follow anywhere you get your podcasts and right here on fox19.com. See you guys then.
Have a good one.